My name is Aurelia Morris. I am 67 years old, and I spent most of my life being someone people simply called Mom. Not a title, not a name, just a function. A quiet woman who ironed uniforms before sunrise, stitched coats through winter nights, and believed that sacrifice, if done in silence, would be repaid in love. I was wrong. Love, when taken for granted, does not echo. It disappears. I remember the exact morning my story broke, not like a plate crashing, but like a rope snapping somewhere deep where no one could hear it. My son emptied my bank account and traveled with his wife and mother-in-law. They flew to Rome while I boiled lentil soup, unaware that every penny I saved over 4 decades had vanished. And 3 days later, he called me, voice soaked in panic and pride all at once, shouting, "What did you do? I hate you!" People imagine a mother must scream, faint, collapse. I did none of that. I set the phone face down on my kitchen table. The kettle hissed behind me. That sound was strangely steady, like breath, like warning, like truth. I did not cry. I did not ask why. I only whispered to myself, "Then it begins. Let me take you back." Not to explain, but to witness. There are betrayals that scream, and betrayals that hum quietly through your bones. Mine was the second kind. You must understand, I did not lose money. I lost the calendar of my life. Every sacrifice I stitched into his future, erased with a single transfer. I was not born strong. I became strong by holding everything while being held by no one. The bank notification arrived at 6:12 a.m. I thought it was a mistake. 80 pages of statements cleared to zero. A balance I had guarded like a small ember against hunger, illness, winter, gone. I made tea with my left hand because my right could no longer hold the cup. Moments later, my neighbor, Marjorie Blake, a retired nurse with silver hair and questions she never voiced aloud, knocked gently. "Aurelia, did you mean to close your account?" she asked, eyes scanning my face like a chart of injuries. I didn't answer. I poured tea into 2 cups, one for her, one to keep my hands from shaking alone. That, right there, was the first lesson betrayal taught me. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes silence is preparation. While my kettle hissed, my son Evan wore Italian linen and raised champagne glasses in Rome. Yes, I saw the photos. Lena, his wife, wrote in the caption, "Fresh start. Some people are better off left behind." Her mother, Vivian, laughed in the background like she had finally defeated someone she'd been at war with. Perhaps that someone was me. Do you want to know what it feels like to be erased while still alive? It feels like scrolling through your own execution, except no one else notices you're gone. I did not slam a door. I did not curse his name. I did the strongest thing a forgotten mother can do. I stayed seated. And I opened my eyes. 3 days after their Roman holiday began, my phone rang again. This time, his voice was trembling, not with guilt, but with fear. Mom, what did you do? They froze everything. Lena's hysterical. Vivian left the hotel. I can't access any of the money. They're saying you... Mom, what did you do? I hate you. Hate me. Imagine that. The boy I once fed from palm to palm, the child who slept against my chest during thunderstorms, now hated me for not drowning quietly. I can tell you now, I didn't take anything from him. I simply stopped him from taking anything more from me. Do not mistake me. This is not a tale of revenge. Revenge is loud, crude, clumsy. What I chose was justice, the kind that does not involve fists or flames, only truth and timing. That morning, after his call ended in static and anger, I turned off the stove. The water inside the kettle had stopped shrieking. The quiet in that kitchen was my first taste of peace. Not forgiveness, not yet, but peace. I touched the surface of my wooden table and thought, this is mine. My grief, my room, my right to stand back up. Most people will ask, why didn't you do something sooner? But mothers like me, we are raised to endure, not to erupt. We patch holes in pockets, not hearts. We say, it's fine, until one day, it isn't. Until one day, your son calls from Rome and tells you he hates you for finally waking up. No, I did not shout back. I did not beg him to come home. I said only this: "I did nothing, Evan. I simply stopped lying for you." There was silence. And then he cried. Not the cry of a child seeking comfort, but the cry of a man facing consequence. If you are still listening, I will tell you what came next. Not to justify myself. Mothers should not have to plead their innocence, but to let you walk beside me through what happens after a woman breaks but refuses to stay broken. You think you know this story. Mother wronged, son ungrateful. But no, this is not a legend of anger. This is a chronicle of awakening. He emptied my bank account. He boarded a plane with women who toasted to my disappearance. And 3 days later, he called me crying. If you want to know what I did, stay. Not because my pain is special, but because it might sound like yours. The morning after his call, I found myself sitting at the same kitchen table where I had taught him to write his name. The sun crept through the faded curtains, casting tired stripes of light across the wooden surface. The kettle on the stove had begun to hiss, a low, persistent sound, like a warning I had ignored for too many years. I did not rush to turn it off. I let it scream. That table had seen everything: burnt toast, unpaid bills, teenage apologies, birthday candles. But that morning, it witnessed something new: the quiet after truth. There are noises louder than shouting: the whistle of boiling water, the click of a bank notification, the echo of your son saying he hates you. I did not speak his name, not out of anger, but protection. He is still my son. Even now, after what he has done, that word refuses to leave me. I carried it longer than I carried him. It is not so easily abandoned. I folded my hands in my lap. They trembled only slightly. I stared at the empty chair across from me. How many nights had I sat in that seat waiting for him to visit? How many times had I kept dinner warm on the stove, convinced his footsteps would finally return? I used to believe he stayed away because life was busy. Now I know. He stayed away because I was no longer useful. The kettle wailed louder. I still did not move. A soft knock broke through the steam. 3 taps. Gentle, uncertain. Only one person knocked like that. Marjorie Blake. My neighbor for 12 years. Retired nurse, widowed. Keeper of secrets she never asked permission to hold. "Aurelia?" Her voice came muffled through the door. "Are you there?" I did not answer. I watched steam curl above the stovetop like grief escaping. The door creaked open. She never waited for permission when she was worried. She stepped inside, setting a bundle of mail on the counter. "I called you twice. You didn't answer. I thought maybe you were resting." I kept my eyes on the kettle. I knew she could see it in my face. Something had snapped, but nothing had shattered. She moved carefully, slowly, the way nurses walk in rooms with heart monitors. "I went to the bank this morning," she said quietly. "They told me your account was closed. Is that right?" Still, I said nothing. She came closer, her voice no longer a question. "Aurelia, did you close your account?" The kettle shrieked. I stood, finally, and walked to the stove. I turned off the flame. The whistling died, but the silence that followed was louder. I poured the hot water into 2 cups, one for her, one for me. I did not look up. I did not speak. That was my answer. Marjorie sat at the table, folding her hands the way nurses do when they prepare to deliver difficult truths. But this time, I was the one holding them. "I've seen that look before," she whispered, "on women who have swallowed every storm until one finally broke them." I lifted my cup and felt the porcelain burn my palms. Good. It reminded me I was still here. She studied me, but she did not press. That was her gift. She did not intrude. She witnessed it. At last, she asked softly, "Was it him?" I closed my eyes, the question she never dared ask before. I opened them again and stared at the empty chair across from us, the chair that once held a boy with skinned knees and pockets full of laughing excuses. "He took it," she murmured, not as judgment, as a translation. All of it. I did not nod. I did not deny it. I took a sip of tea. The heat scorched my tongue, but I welcomed it. Tears are not the only way pain can leave the body. "How much?" she asked. Let the steam answer. Some betrayals do not need numbers, only witnesses. She inhaled shakily. He went too far, Aurelia. I said my first words of the morning. He didn't go far, I murmured. He went exactly where I pushed him to believe he could. I think that startled her. Not the fact, but the ownership of it. A mother admitting complicity in her own erasure. You gave him everything, she said. I shook my head slowly. I gave without asking if he was capable of returning anything. She reached gently across the table, but did not touch my hand, respecting a boundary I had never spoken. The light shifted. Outside, garbage trucks groaned down the boulevard. The world continued as though my son had not just rewritten my life in red ink. She tried again. Will you report it? Will you do anything? I stared into my tea, golden surface trembling. There it was, the question everyone would ask. Would I fight? Would I forgive? Would I stay silent? I placed the cup down. The sound was soft but final. There are storms, I said calmly, that are not meant to be survived, only witnessed. Marjorie frowned slightly. What are you going to do? I looked at the kettle. Quiet now. It's still hot inside. I am done boiling, I said. Now I will simmer. She did not understand then. Maybe she does now. That morning, after she left, I remained at the table. I listened to the clock. I traced the wood grain with my thumb. I remembered the last time my son sat there. He was 31. He told me, Mom, don't call me every week. I'm married now. He laughed when he said it. A cruel laugh disguised as casual. I laughed too, a practiced reflex. I did not know then that love can bruise without fists. I leaned back in my chair. The quiet of the house pressed against my chest like a second heartbeat. I could still hear his voice from Rome, wet with blame. What did you do? I hate you. Hate me. He thought I had taken something from him. But no. I had simply turned off a faucet he believed was endless. I touched the table once more. The varnish was worn. There were scratches from his childhood toys, burns from my old iron skillet. This table had seen more truth than any confession box. I whispered into the empty room, not for anyone to hear, but to mark the moment. I am not broken. I am unfinished. The kettle sat cooling, metal skin dimming from silver to ash. That is what silence becomes when it hardens, not surrender. Forged steel. People say mothers are made of patience. I say we are made of thresholds. We open and open and open. Until one day we close, not with a slam, but with a lock no one hears. If he calls again, I will not answer, not out of punishment, out of proof. I was not always this quiet. There was a time when my laughter echoed in small kitchens and laundry rooms, carried by the rhythm of survival. I was 27 when I realized I had no one else to lean on but the hands attached to my own arms. Back then, I stitched other people's names onto school uniforms to afford needles and thread for mending my own boys' socks. I worked in rich houses, polishing silver spoons I never tasted from, pressing linen napkins embroidered with initials that were not mine. I learned to fold silence the way others folded tablecloths, but every dollar I earned, I counted twice. Once for today and once for his tomorrow. I fed him with empty plates and full hope. People laugh when they hear that. They think it's a poetic exaggeration. It isn't. Many nights I lied to him. I told him I had already eaten, that I wasn't hungry. I brewed tea to fill my stomach while heating leftover rice for him. Mothers master deception only when it keeps a child from seeing hunger. My name was never on any office door, yet I cleaned offices until my knees stiffened. I never held a degree, yet I ironed graduation gowns for young men my son's age. Men whose mothers never washed hotel sheets at dawn or collected soda cans to sell for gas money. I remember one winter, bitter, biting, merciless, I found him shivering in bed, cheeks red with fever. Evan couldn't have been more than 6. He whimpered, "Mama, my chest hurts." I had no health insurance, no emergency fund, only a jar of coins I'd saved for his school shoes. By midnight, he was coughing blood. I carried him to the clinic. The receptionist asked for a payment up front, $1,200. I had $235. I remember placing my wedding band on the counter. Plain gold. all that remained of a man who left before our son learned to spell his last name. "This should cover it," I said. She looked at it, then at me. I saw something flicker across her face. Pity, perhaps, or respect. "We'll hold it," she said. "For now." They kept him overnight. Pneumonia. Serious but treatable. I kept vigil by his bed, counting the seconds between his breaths. Each inhale a prayer. Each exhale's a negotiation. Take everything I have, but leave him. When he awoke, he whispered, "Mama, did I make you scared?" And I lied. "No, baby, I don't get scared." I have been scared every day since. You might wonder why I never remarried, why I never sought rest. Rest is not free. It is something a woman like me must purchase, with regret, with permission, with a softness I could never afford. I filled our home with what I could barter: handmade quilts, secondhand furniture, jars of home-canned peaches. I taped the corners of our windows in winter to keep the cold out. I patched holes in his jacket sleeves using fabric from my own coat. I raised him on stories about honesty, mercy, and repayment. I thought if I poured enough goodness into him, it would grow roots. But roots need more than water. They need soil that wants to hold them. Sometimes I return to those years in my mind like flipping through a worn photo album. The image blurs, but the feelings do not. I see myself sitting on the floor, sorting laundry. He's beside me, building towers from clothespins. He asks, "Mama, when I'm big, will I buy you a house?" "You won't need to," I told him. "Just don't forget me." That was all I ever asked. Not success, not repayment, just remembrance. It would be easy to paint him as ungrateful from birth, but that's not the truth. He was once tender, once afraid to sleep without holding my hand. He was the boy who cried when he broke a vase, then tried to fix it with tape and apology. But there is a moment, a hinge, that changes everything. A boy steps into a newer world, a world where mothers are not seen as women, but relics, where kindness is currency only fools carry. I do not know the precise hour that happened to him, but I know what it cost me. I watched him become fluent in a language I could not speak: ambition, image, distance. He learned to speak gently to strangers and curtly to me. When did I become someone he wished would wait for permission to exist? But I kept believing there was still goodness in him, because I had planted it, because I had nourished it, because I had paid for it with coins, rings, and years. Sometimes I think back to that ring, my wedding band, simple gold, pawned so he could breathe. To this day, I do not know where it rests, on a stranger's finger, melted into another shape, lost in a drawer. But here is the truth I have never spoken aloud. It was not the only thing I sold. I sold my body to exhaustion, my youth at work, my voice to endurance, all under the belief that one day he would look at me and know, without words, that I had been his shelter. But shelters are taken for granted until the roof caves. The whistle of the kettle returned me to the present. I looked around my kitchen, same table, same chipped mug, but something fundamental had shifted. My life had existed as an unbroken sentence. Now, at last, there was a period. I leaned back in my chair and said it aloud, quietly, to the empty room. I raised him to be safe, not to be kind. It was not an accusation, it was a confession, and now I must live with its consequences. I first met Lena on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of late summer day when the air hangs heavy and tired. I had spent the morning simmering stew and polishing the good silverware. The set I kept boxed for milestones. I thought I would one day be invited to celebrate. Evan had called days earlier. "I'm bringing someone I want you to meet," he said. His voice was bright, trimmed, rehearsed. I pressed the phone to my chest after he hung up. I told myself not to hope too deeply. Hope, when mishandled, can fracture like glass. When the knock came, I wiped my hands on my apron and opened the door. There she stood, Lena, tall, immaculate, hair sleek as poured ink. She smelled faintly of rose water and detachment, and beside her, a woman I would later learn was her mother, Vivian, wearing a coat too elegant for the heat and a smile too thin to hold sincerity. "This is my mom," Evan said. "Mom, this is Lena and Ms. Whitcomb." "Please," she corrected, lifting her chin. "Vivian." Lena's eyes drifted past me, scanning the hallway, the walls, the frayed rug beneath her heels. She smiled, not in warmth, but in survey. "Such a charming house," she murmured. The pause between her words and the compliment held more truth than the compliment itself. I ushered them inside. The air between us moved like stiff drapery. I offered lemonade. Vivian declined. "I don't do sugar." Her eyes already inspecting every chipped frame and fading paint line, like she was touring an artifact of a life she would never choose. They sat on my couch, upright, legs crossed, hands folded as if waiting to be served. Evan paced, nervous. He asked about my stew, about the weather. Not once did he ask if I was well. At dinner, I laid out stew, bread, and peaches in syrup. My best effort, the kind of meal my mother used to call for proud days. I waited for someone to say it smelled good. No one did. Lena picked at her plate, expression unreadable. Vivian dabbed her mouth delicately, then asked, "Evan tells us you still work?" I nodded. I meant clothing, hem dresses, a little sewing. "A seamstress," she said, as though diagnosing a condition. "How traditional." Then she turned to her daughter. "Imagine that, Lena." Lena nodded. "Yes, imagine." They weren't speaking to me. They were speaking around me. There is a particular cruelty in that, being present yet irrelevant. I tried to join their conversation. I asked where they were from. "Boston," Vivian answered, "though honestly, we've outgrown it." I smiled politely. "Growth is a blessing." She tilted her head. "Only if everyone grows together." Later, Evan stepped outside to take a call. "Work," he mouthed. I began clearing plates. Vivian watched. "You don't have to," she said. "I don't mind," I replied. "No," she sipped her wine. "You don't have to prove anything. A mother should know when she is no longer needed." The words entered me like a slow blade. I did not reply. I stacked plates. Lena shifted in her chair. "Evan said you worry about him. You shouldn't. He's building his own life now, a modern one." "Yes," I said quietly. "I wanted that." "Then let him have it," she replied. When Evan came back, he found the room silent. He looked at me, then at them, unsure which world to align himself with. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Perfect," Lena said, slipping her hand into his. I went to the kitchen. I turned on the tap. Let the water run. It drowned the sound of their laughter. That night, after they left, I walked through my house. Our house. I touched the door frame where I had measured his height in pencil marks. I traced the grooves of the dining table worn by our elbows, our meals, our small holidays. "Charming house," she had said. Such a charming house. Funny how a stranger can reduce decades into a single word. They visited twice more after that. Each time, Lena's presence grew bolder, Vivian's sharper. They brought scented candles I hadn't asked for, rearranged frames I had placed deliberately. Once I found a sticky note on my pantry door. "Needs updating." I pretended not to see it. Evan stopped calling me Mama, started calling me Ma. Then Mom. Then nothing at all when Lena was around. One Sunday, he arrived alone. He told me they were engaged. I baked a pie to celebrate. He said they couldn't stay, that Vivian had a reservation downtown. As he put on his coat, I asked, "Will I be at the wedding?" He hesitated. "Lena thinks it might be simpler, small, private." I nodded. I did not cry. I found 2 teacups, washed them, and placed them gently back on the shelf. I learned to stop asking questions, not because I didn't want answers, but because I realized questions can humiliate the one asking them when the listener has no intention of kindness. A mother should know when she is no longer needed. I repeated that line to myself until it ceased to pierce. Then I folded it inside me like cloth kept for mending. One evening, long after they left, I sat at my sewing machine repairing a stranger's dress. The thread snapped. I reached for my needle, but froze. I saw it clearly. Lena's eyes, Vivian's smirk, Evan's silence. And I understood something terrible. They did not think I was in their way. They thought I was already gone. From that night on, I did not wait by the window. I did not set out extra plates. I did not speak his name aloud. I mended fabric. I mended time. But some seams cannot be hidden. There is never a single moment when a mother is discarded. It happens slowly, like dusk. You don't realize the light is fading until you find yourself sitting in darkness, unsure when the evening arrived. The last time I visited his home uninvited, I carried a peach cobbler warm from the oven. It was his favorite growing up, the one dessert he once swore he'd request every birthday. I can still hear his voice at 12, flour on his chin, whispering, "When I'm older, make this for my children too." I held on to that promise longer than he did. His apartment was in a polished building, glass doors, polished mailboxes, the kind of lobby with white lilies arranged to impress strangers. I stood there holding my cobbler dish, watching my reflection in the marble floor. A security guard approached. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I'm here for Evan Morris," I replied. He called upstairs, spoke briefly, then his eyes shifted with discomfort. He said he isn't expecting visitors. My hands tensed around the dish. "I'm his mother." The guard hesitated. He asked that no one be let up without notice. No one, not even blood. I thanked him, though my voice broke. I left the cobbler with the guard. "If he wants it," I said. The man nodded, uncertain. I walked home that day, 20 blocks, holding nothing. 3 days later, he called. "Mom, don't come by like that," he said, not angrily, annoyed, indifferent. "Lena doesn't like surprises. We have a routine." "I made you dessert," I murmured. "You don't have to do that anymore. I'm married. I have my own life now." I stood in my kitchen, staring at the empty space on the counter where the cobbler cooled just days ago. The silence between us grew a pulse. "You have your own life," I repeated slowly. "Yes, so don't show up. Call first. Call first. Like a polite visitor, like a distant cousin, not a mother." After that, I no longer baked on Sundays. I no longer waited by windows. I no longer set a second plate on the table. Instead, I learned to fold towels more precisely, to stir soup more slowly, to accept that quiet does not always mean peace. Sometimes it is simply a vacancy. I saw him again only once, months later outside a cafe. He didn't notice me at first. He was laughing, phone in hand, Lena beside him, wearing sunglasses, though it was not bright. I almost called him. Instead, I watched. He tossed his head back the way he used to when begging me for candy. But his smile was different now. Lighter, careless, untouched by history. When he finally saw me, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt? Obligation? He approached. "Mom, you're out?" As though I were a houseplant that had sprouted legs. "I was nearby," I said. "We were just getting coffee." He smiled, gesturing to Lena. I nodded. "I baked cobbler last week. I wasn't sure if you got it." He looked away. "We were busy. Things get misplaced." Misplaced. 30 years of recipes. The dessert I taught myself from a library book because it was the only way to make his birthdays feel whole. Misplaced. Lena lifted her cup. "You should take up hobbies, Aurelia. Join a club or something. It's important to detach." Detach. Such a neat word for abandonment. That night, I opened my pantry. I stared at the jar of preserved peaches I had prepared last summer. Gold slices suspended in syrup. Waiting. I left them on the shelf. I realized then I had spent years making offerings to an altar no longer sacred. People think estrangement comes with arguments, shouting, doors slammed, but the cruelest distance is polite, civil, administrative. A mother erased not with anger, but with scheduling. I held no resentment toward Lena or Vivian. They had not stolen my son. They had simply taught him how to live in a world where I had no utility. He chose to learn. But here is the unspoken truth. They did not break me. They revealed it to me. I began to see my life more clearly, not as devotion, but depletion. I saw how I apologized when I wasn't wrong, how I offered meals to people who never asked about mine, how I filled their cups while my own ran dry. So I began the smallest rebellion I have ever known. I stopped dialing his number. I stopped keeping food warm for a guest who no longer returned. I stopped pretending I was waiting. One morning, I passed a bakery with peach pastries in the window. I paused. I watched a child press her nose to the glass, her mother kneeling beside her, smiling. I felt no envy, no ache, only recognition. There is a difference between losing and being released. I walked on. Weeks blurred. Seasons shifted. I mended dresses for neighbors, sold quilts, saved coins, built a life that did not expect applause. And then, one ordinary morning, the storm broke. A bank notification. Available balance, $450 not misplaced. Taken. That was the moment everything aligned, not in chaos, in clarity. He had not just taken my savings, he had taken the last debt he believed I owed him. The debt of unconditional forgiveness. He was wrong. I did not grieve that night. I boiled water, I watched the kettle tremble, and I remembered the last untouched cobbler. That was the last thing I ever baked for him. People ask me now, do you still love him? Love is not the question. Recognition is, I do not love the man who emptied my account. I remember the boy who wept when his balloon flew away, but I cannot resurrect him. I sat at my table, folded my hands, and made a vow. No more offerings. If he wants to eat, he will learn to cook. If he wants forgiveness, he will learn to ask. And if he wants my presence, he will learn how to knock. The morning I discovered it, the sky was pale and indifferent, one of those mornings so ordinary that you trust it. I had just brewed coffee and was sorting linens when the first alert came through. My phone buzzed twice in quick succession, a vibration sharp enough to unsettle the quiet. Bank account alert, available balance, $0 At first, I thought it was a glitch. Systems fail, digits misalign. But then another notification arrived, colder. Transfer completed, $76,400. I stared at the screen, the numbers glaring like headlights. I blinked, waiting for their shape to change. They didn't. $76,400, 40 years of sewing, laundering, penny rolling, flattened into a single line of text. I did not drop the phone. I did not gasp. My body did not obey the theatric's grief demands. Instead, I stood very still, as if a sudden movement might shatter what I had spent a lifetime holding together. I called the bank. A mechanical voice greeted me first, then a human one, polite and practiced. He authenticated online, the banker said. Full access, wire transfer, authorized under joint beneficiary rights. Joint, beneficiary, words I never signed, rights I never granted. I asked one question. Where did it go? To an account in the name of Evan Morris, my son, my only child. I hung up before she finished speaking. I walked to the kitchen and placed the phone gently on the counter as though mishandling it might worsen the truth. I turned on the stove. The kettle began to heat. There is a moment after betrayal where everything becomes painfully clear, not chaotic, but crystalline. My kitchen, worn and loyal, came into sharp focus. The chipped yellow tiles, the lace curtain I stitched by hand, the old clock tapping steady seconds on the wall. Seconds I had once used to time his breathing when he was sick. He didn't just take my savings. He took the story of my life. Every dollar was a chapter he had erased. I poured water into the kettle. My hands did not shake. The second alert came from a different realm, not finance, but spectacle. A message from my neighbor, Marjorie. Aurelia, have you seen Instagram? I opened it. There he was. Rome, gelato in hand, sunglasses, sunlit. With her, Lena, tilting her head against his shoulder, and behind them, Vivian raising a wineglass like a queen at a coronation. Caption, New beginnings. Some doors must close for better ones to open. Lena had commented beneath it. Thank you, Mill. We'll use it better than you ever would. A laughing emoji, a champagne bottle. My kettle began to whistle. There is a grief so total it does not break you. It empties you. I felt no tears, no fury, only vacancy, as if every organ had been replaced with echo. The house was silent except for the rising pitch of the kettle. It screamed on my behalf. I lifted it from the flame. I did not cry. I poured tea. I sat at the table, the same table where I once taught him to count coins for his school trip. "Pennies make dollars, baby," I had told him, dropping each one like a prayer. Every little saves something big. Now those pennies had gone to Rome. I took a slow sip. The tea burned my tongue. I welcomed it. Pain is proof of life. My phone buzzed again. Another photo. Colosseum, his arm around Lena. Champagne. Her mother beside them, a silk scarf trailing over her shoulder. They looked happy, not guilty, not hesitant. Happy. Memories came then, not as comfort, but as witnesses. Him at 6, cheeks smeared with jam, promising to buy me a big house one day. Him at 15, slamming the door but returning at midnight to apologize. Him at 23, asking for a loan with trembling pride. I had not raised a thief, but I had raised someone who believed I would never stop giving. There is a difference. I set my cup down. Carefully. I spoke aloud to no one. This was not theft. This was expected. That, truly, was the deepest wound. Not that he betrayed me, that he assumed I would endure it. I stood, slowly, not in weakness, but in awakening. I walked to my cupboard, removed the metal tin where I kept my birth certificate, my mortgage, papers, and my modest will. I opened it and saw a folded slip of paper, his first letter to Santa. "Dear Santa, I want a bike. My mom deserves a dress." I traced the childish scrawl with my thumb. "You forgot," I whispered, "but I remember." The clock ticked, the kettle cooled, and something inside me rose. Not vengeance, but resolve. People expect mothers to fall to their knees at betrayal. I would not. I would stand, not to win, but to witness, not to punish, but to draw a line no one could unwrite. By evening, I had packed the tin back into place. I washed my cup. I folded the dish towel. I set the chair back under the table. Routine remained. I had changed. When night came, I did not pray. I did not plead. I simply made a vow. If I must be emptied, it will be by choice. He emptied my account. He took what was never his to take. Now I would reclaim what was always mine to keep. My name, my dignity, my silence. The kettle, though quiet now, held heat long after the flame. So did I. The phone did not ring that night, but it would. And when it did, I would no longer answer as someone who owed. I would answer as someone who remained. I chose a Tuesday. Tuesdays feel practical. They are the days when offices open on time and people answer phones with their work voice. I put on my dark skirt, pressed my blouse, and tucked my hair beneath a scarf my mother once wore to church. I slipped my documents into a worn leather folder and left the kettle cooling on the stove like a sentry. Judge Harold Keene lived 3 blocks away in a brick building that had outlasted several city councils. He had retired years earlier, but you could still hear the courtroom in his voice when he said hello. I had met him through Marjorie at a neighborhood food drive. He was the kind of man who listened with his entire face. He opened the door before I knocked twice. "Aurelia," he said, stepping aside, "come in." His apartment smelled faintly of old books and lemon oil. Everywhere I looked, there were signs of long service, framed commendations, a gavel in a glass case, photographs of people shaking his hand. I sat on a wooden chair near the window. He poured tea into 2 cups without asking if I wanted any. He knew that I did. "What can I do for you?" he asked. I set the folder on my lap and spoke with the steadiness of someone who has practiced in silence. "I need guidance," I said. "Not sympathy." He nodded. "Go on." My bank account was emptied through a transfer I did not authorize. The funds were moved to an account in my son's name. There are indicators of forged access, joint rights I never granted, and a pattern of withdrawals that precede the final transfer. He did not flinch at the word son. He had heard the worst from the best of families. He took a breath. "Do you want to pursue this as a domestic matter or a legal matter?" I met his eyes. "I am not here as a mother. I am here as a citizen." Something shifted in the room, a new alignment. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. A judge again. "Then let us proceed," he said, "step by step." He took a yellow legal pad and wrote in precise, compact lines. "First, documentation. You need every page of your account history for the last 18 months. Print them. Do not rely on screenshots. Second, a written timeline in your own words. Dates, times, phone calls, visits. Third, a sworn statement that you did not authorize joint access, digital enrollment, or beneficiary changes. We will have it notarized." His pen scratched on. "Fourth, report to the bank's fraud and elder financial abuse unit. Use those exact words. Fifth, file an incident report with the local police for record. You are not asking them to solve a crime. You are creating a paper trail. Sixth, contact Adult Protective Services and ask for a consultation. Again, paper trail." He looked up. "Seventh, freeze any remaining lines that can be exploited. Credit reports, utilities that allow auto-pay changes, subscription services. Predators, even when they share blood, often test for more vulnerabilities." Predators. He did not pause to soften it. I was grateful. He continued. "Eighth, consider a temporary protective order for your assets, not against the person, against misuse. We can draft language that focuses on financial conduct rather than personal conflict." I sat very still. The words did not bruise. They constructed. "Can you do this, Aurelia?" He asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "I've been doing hard things my entire life. I simply did not call them by their names." He slid a pen across the table. "Then let us begin by naming." We spent the next 2 hours building the spine of my case. He dictated. I wrote. He corrected my dates with the care of a man who had watched many truths collapse under sloppy records. I included the first small withdrawal that had confused me months back. I see. The paperless mail change I had ignored the day the bank app stopped recognizing my password. "Patterns are stories," he said. "Courts read them. Banks read them. Your task is to make yours legible." When we were done, he handed me a list of addresses. The bank's regional escalation office, not the branch. The notary 2 blocks over who still keeps March hours. The community legal clinic in case we need a second signature. And this is the APS liaison who actually returns calls. I stood to leave. He touched the folder lightly, a blessing. "One more thing," he said. "Do not call your son. Do not warn him. Let the process do the speaking." I nodded. "I do not intend to speak where paper can speak for me." He smiled, brief and proud. "You will be fine." "Fine is not my goal," I said. "Whole is." He bowed his head. "Then whole it is." At the bank's regional office, the lobby was colder than memory. I waited beneath a large photograph of smiling retirees holding hands in a field. When my number was called, I met with a woman whose nameplate read, "Ms. Aranda, Fraud and Financial Protection." I slid the stack across the desk. "I am reporting elder financial abuse and unauthorized transfers. Here is my documentation." Her professionalism faltered. Respect replaced it. She paged through copies, statements, my timeline, the sworn statement Harold had notarized. She stopped at the Instagram printouts I had tucked at the back, Rome, the caption, the comment, the date stamp that matched my transfer. "You printed social media," she said, surprised. "I printed the truth," I replied. She nodded. "We will initiate an internal freeze pending investigation. It will not be simple, it will not be fast, but your file is in order." "Please also add a note to my profile," I said, "that all changes must be done in person with 2 forms of identification, no exceptions." She typed quickly. "Done." I thanked her and left. Outside, the day felt less like weather and more like footing. At the notary, my hand did not shake when I signed. At the police station, I declined to sit while waiting. The officer who took my report wrote, "Domestic financial exploitation," in the narrative line and read it back to me with care. At Adult Protective Services, a woman named Courtney spoke as though she were passing a candle from her hands to mine. "You are not alone," she said. "We see this every day." "I believe you," I replied. I wish I did not. "Do you feel safe at home?" she asked. "I do," I said, "because I am there." She paused, then smiled. "Good answer." By afternoon, I was back in my kitchen. I set the folder on the table and turned on the stove. The kettle woke slowly, a low hum swelling to a clear voice. For the first time since the transfer, I allowed myself to breathe deeply. Not relief, readiness. I took out a red notebook I had purchased on my way home. On the first page, I wrote a sentence in block letters. I am no longer an apology. I am a record. I listed the steps completed. I added tomorrow's tasks. I noted names, times, confirmation numbers. I wrote down the smell of lemon oil in Harold's apartment, the way Ms. Aranda's eyes changed when she saw my prepared file, the sound of the APS worker's voice when she said I was not alone. These details mattered. They were the texture of my return to myself. Marjorie knocked that evening. 3 taps. I opened the door before she said my name. "You were out all day," she said, concerned. "I was," I replied, pouring tea into 2 cups. "Did you do it?" she asked. "I did." "How do you feel?" I looked at the kettle. Steam rose like a small banner. "Like the floor stopped moving," I said. "Like the room is mine again." She sat, exhaling. "What happens now?" "Paper happens," I said. "Systems happen, and silence. Not the kind that hides, the kind that holds." She nodded slowly. "You sound like a verdict, Aurelia." "Not a verdict," I said. "A boundary." That night, before I slept, I stood at the window and watched the street glow under tired lamps. For years, I had feared that asserting myself would make me hard. It has not. It has made me precise. I am not here as a mother. I am here as a citizen. And tomorrow, I will be both. The call came at dawn, the hour when even sorrow hesitates. I had just placed the kettle on the flame when my phone rattled across the table like a small creature trying to escape. I did not rush. I watched the blue ring of fire catch and steady. Then I answered. At first there was only noise. Wind, a scrape, a breath that sounded like running. Then his voice, thinned by distance and panic. "Mom, what did you do? My card is blocked. Every account is frozen. They told me to call the bank. They said there is an investigation. Lena is screaming. Vivian is packing. What did you do?" He did not wait for an answer. He hurled questions like stones at a door that would not open. I looked at the stove. The kettle was beginning to hum. "Where are you?" I asked. "Outside the hotel, near the square. I do not even know the name. It has statues and people with cameras. It does not matter. They will not let us check out. They said the card is declined. This is insane." I could hear her in the background. Lena. A sharp voice rising and cutting. Words like incompetent and childish and grow up. Another voice. Colder, steady ear. Vivian. I imagined her lifting her suitcase with one hand and her chin with the other. "Give me the phone," Lena snapped behind him. "No," he said, and his voice broke. "I'm talking to my mother." My mother. After months of silence, the words struck like a bell. "What did you do?" he pleaded, then flared into accusation. "What did you do? I hate you." I let the words pass through me. I felt worse. I had survived worse. Hatred, hurled from an ocean away, could not unmake the woman who placed the kettle on a flame and waited for the water to decide it would boil. "I did nothing," I said. "I simply stopped you." He went quiet. Not the quiet of understanding, the quiet of insult. He waited for me to explain, to apologize, to soften. I did none of those things. Lena seized the phone. "Aurelia, this is outrageous. You have embarrassed us. Do you understand? We are in another country. We have reservations. Evan promised. What kind of mother does this?" I kept my eyes on the growing steam, the kind who has learned the difference between love and permission. "Do you hear her?" Lena shouted away from the phone. "She thinks she is some judge." Then back to me. "You will call the bank. You will undo whatever stunt you pulled, or we will never speak to you again." That is not a threat, I said. That is a pattern. Vivian's voice entered, low and acidic. Enough. Give me that. A pause. The muffled switch of hands. Mrs. Morris, you have made a spectacle of yourself. You have trapped your own son. Do you plan to be this difficult for the rest of his life? I wiped a ring of moisture from the table with the corner of my dish towel. I plan to be precise. Do you know who I am? She asked. I know exactly who you are, I said. You are the woman who taught my son that comfort matters more than character. She drew in a breath sharp enough to cut. We are leaving, she announced. Not to me, perhaps not even to him, but to the image of herself as someone in charge. Evan, pack your things. We will not stay in a hotel that does not respect us. There was fumbling, voices overlapped, the chaotic ballet of people who only understand choreography when money moves beneath their feet. Somewhere a horn blared, somewhere a suitcase zipper surrendered. He came back on the line, smaller now. They are going. They said I can figure it out. They said I should call you and make you fix it. Mom, please, I am standing in the street. My kettle began to whistle. The sound rose, clear and pure, like a memory when you stop arguing with it. Listen, I said. To what? He asked. To this, I answered, and I lifted the phone toward the kettle. The whistle filled the line, a long, unwavering note. What is that? He asked, disoriented. Boiling water, I said. It sounds like anger, but it is only heat, becoming itself. He said nothing. You asked me what I did, I continued. I told the truth to the right people and signed my name. Paper is speaking now. You will answer questions when you return. You will account for transfers you did not earn. You will learn the price of assuming I would never lock a door. That is cruel, he whispered. No, I said. That is accurate. Lena shouted again in the background. Doors slammed. Wheels rolled over stone. Vivian's voice faded as if she were already turning a corner. The life they had curated was thinning, like cheap fabric pulled too hard. What am I supposed to do? He said, and there it was, the old music of a child on the edge of tears, trying to disguise the tremor. You are supposed to stand, I said. Find the embassy, call the number on the notice they gave you, tell the truth. Think before you speak, and when you land back home, meet with the people who will ask where the money came from and why you thought it belonged to you. It did belong to me, he blurted. The reflex burned him as soon as it left his mouth. I mean, I thought you never said no. I am saying it now, I replied. He swallowed. I heard it. A small sound, a human sound. Then he tried one last weapon, the one that had always worked. Please, he begged. Mom, please. The whistle softened as the kettle ran out of air. The room filled with a hush, so complete I could hear my own pulse. When you were 6, I said, you asked me if I get scared. I told you no. That was a lie. I've been afraid many times, but not today. I do not understand you, he said. That is because you only learned to hear me when I was bending. I let a breath out, steady, final. Call the number, Evan. He was quiet for a long moment. Then came the sound of the phone moving. Voices farther now, a city louder. Fine, he muttered. Fine. Good, I said. The line clicked. The call ended. I removed the kettle from the burner. The metal settled with a soft pop. Outside, a delivery truck sighed at the curb. In my kitchen, nothing was broken. Not a glass, not a plate, not me. I did not celebrate. I did not shake. I stood in the small country of my kitchen and felt the ground hold. The reversal had begun hours earlier on legal paper. Now it had reached his ears. Not with shouting, not with humiliation, with the simplest sentence I had learned to say. I did nothing. I simply stopped you. I poured the last of the hot water over a tea bag and watched the color bloom. It reminded me of a sunset I once saw from a bus window when he was little, how every passenger quieted at the same time, how we all knew something was ending and something else was beginning, how no one needed to say a word. I carried the cup to the table and sat. I opened my red notebook and wrote the date, the time, the city on the other end of the line. I wrote, Lena shouted. Vivian left. Evan stayed. Then I underlined the last two words. Evan stayed. Because staying is what you do when the scaffolding falls and you discover whether there is anything inside you besides Dacre. I sipped my tea. Heat moved through me with purpose. For the first time since the transfer, I did not feel emptied. I felt occupied by resolve, by air, by the knowledge that I had not harmed him by telling the truth. I had only removed the audience. Outside, morning widened. In Rome, perhaps, a man I once knew folded his phone and looked up at the sky and did not care whether he had money or not. Perhaps he felt small. Perhaps he felt free. Both are honest beginnings. As for me, I cleaned the cup, set it to dry, and let the room rest in the dignity of its own quiet. I did not hear his next call, or perhaps I did and chose not to move toward it. Either way, I let the phone ring into silence. I had spoken what I needed to speak. From here on, consequence would be his only companion. But he called, of that I am certain, because what happened next would not have found him otherwise. Some say an awakening begins with remorse. It does not. It begins with abandonment. He told me later, though told is too generous a word, for it arrived in pieces, through the lips of others and the letters he never meant for me to read, that after our final call, he walked back into the hotel expecting to negotiate, to repair, to perform the role of man in control. But the stage had already been struck. Lena was gone. Vivian, too. Not gone in outrage, but gone in strategy. Their luggage vanished, their perfume lingering only as mockery. At the reception desk, he found a single note folded beside the room key. Handle your family. We did not sign up for poverty. No signature, no apology. The clerk told him they had left in a taxi, smiling. They had not asked him to follow. That, I think, was the first fracture. Not the money, not the investigation. The realization that he had not been loved, only useful. He wandered into the street, still believing this was temporary. He dialed Lena. No answer. He tried again, straight to voicemail. He called Vivian. Declined. He began to run, not toward them, but away from embarrassment. Rome, for all its glory, offers nowhere to hide. Every alley ends in witness. Every fountain reflects the face you cannot escape. He returned to the square, where tourists gathered to take pictures with marble heroes. He sat on the steps, clutching his phone, convincing himself that this was punishment, not truth. That was when he heard them. He recognized Lena's voice first. Steady, rehearsed, ruthless. They were behind him, on the far side of a stone pillar. He moved closer, unseen. I am not going back to him, she said. He is finished, Vivian replied. Let him drown. We warned him not to rely on that woman's account. He thought she would forgive it, Lena scoffed. She is just a mother. Just a mother, the same phrase he had used years ago to justify forgetting me. She'll forgive him, Vivian added. Mothers always do, and if she does not, he'll find another one to blame. They laughed. I do not know if he cried. I only know he did not approach them. He did not beg. He turned and walked the other direction. For the first time in his adult life, he had nowhere to send his shame. He went to the embassy, not proudly, but obediently. They confirmed the freeze. They told him to prepare for an inquiry. They gave him a document outlining the charges under review: misappropriation, elder abuse, fraudulent signature. He signed their forms with the same hand he used to sign my birthday cards as a boy. He tried to call me again. This time I let it ring. I imagine his thoughts then, because I once held them. I imagine he told himself the same lies every unready soul tells. She didn't mean it. She's emotional. She'll come around. She's my mother. But mothers are not laws of nature. We are not endless. We reach the edges. And when we do not explode. We recede. That night he found a hostel, the kind with bunk beds and strangers and rations of bread. He lay down fully clothed, clutching his phone like a relic. It did not ring. He scrolled through old messages, searching for something, anything that might prove I had once promised to never let him fall. There was nothing. Only my last words. I did nothing. I simply stopped you. He tried to summon anger, but each attempt ended in echo. In the silence, memory returned, but not in photographs, in sensations. The weight of a quilt I had sewn, the taste of peach syrup, the scrape of my chair against the kitchen floor, the sound of my whisper when he was small. I am here. He remembered, too, the night he said, I have my own life now, and how I had nodded instead of pleading. He replayed it, this time noticing the crack that had passed through my eyes, the crack he had stepped over without looking down. He thought she would forgive me, but forgiveness, like money, is not infinite. He called again at dawn. I watched the phone tremble on the table. I did not answer. There is a power in not responding that no speech can match. It is not vengeance. It is void, and void forces a man to face the architecture of himself. In Rome, he faced his. He walked to a fountain and sat among strangers. Water spilled from stone gods indifferent. He pulled his jacket tight, though the weather was warm. He began, for the first time, to calculate the cost of every moment he had expected me to cushion. She'll forgive me. That phrase soured. She'll forgive me. A question now. He found work at the embassy answering basic forms while waiting for the next flight home. He slept in a shared room. He ate what was given. He stood in lines. Days passed. I did not answer. Someone once said men do not change until staying the same hurts more than transformation. But I have learned something deeper. Men do not change until silence stops protecting them. He called again, but softer this time. Mom, he said, please, just let me hear your voice. I stood at the window with my back to the phone. Outside, children were drawing chalk suns on the sidewalk. A woman carried groceries. The world continued, indifferent to apologies. I closed my eyes. My heart did not shatter. I let it ring. In that moment, something irreversible occurred. Not in him, but in me. I accepted that silence was not punishment. It was preservation. The first symptom was not pain. It was fatigue, the kind that did not ask permission. A simple walk to the mailbox left me breathless. I dismissed it at first, blaming age, weather, anything but truth. But truth does not need belief to exist. One morning, while folding laundry, a sharp weakness passed through me like a shadow. I set the sheet down and sat, unusually still. My heartbeat, steady as a metronome all my life, stuttered. Something told me to call the doctor, not for fear, but confirmation. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and resignation. I sat upright on the exam table while a young physician reviewed my blood work with careful detachment. He was kind, but kindness cannot soften gravity. There are abnormalities, he said. Your blood cells, they're changing in a way that is persistent. Persistent, a word so calm, so clinical, it almost sounded polite, but I understood. I did not need the medical terms. The word had weight. I asked one question. How long? He hesitated. It varies. Months, perhaps. Treatment? It exists. There are options, but they may be difficult, aggressive. Will it save me? He searched my face as though I had asked him to measure the horizon. It may extend time, but we cannot promise what kind of time. I nodded. I straightened my skirt. I felt a strange clarity, like hearing a final note after a long song. I rose from the table. The doctor blinked. Would you like to call someone? A family member? A friend? I will call no one, I said. Not yet. Do you need anything from me? I looked him in the eye. I don't fear death. I fear the unfinished truth. He did not understand. Most don't. On the bus ride home, I watched the city pass in fragments. Children racing down sidewalks, a woman sweeping her porch, a couple arguing quietly at a stoplight. Life insisted on itself. I did not feel outside of it. I felt beside it, as though moving parallel to something I once inhabited. When I stepped into my house, I did not weep. I put on a kettle. I listened to it hum. My body is tired. My mind sharpened. If time was shortening, then what remained must be deliberate. That evening, I walked to the corner store and bought something I had never owned before, a new notebook. red cover, thick pages, strong binding, a ledger, not for accounts, but for legacy. The cashier, a teenage boy with tired eyes, scanned it without looking up. "Planning something?" he asked absently. "Yes," I said, "an ending." He didn't understand. He didn't need to. Back home, I cleared the kitchen table. I placed the red notebook in the center. I wrote my name inside the front cover. Not Mom, not Aurelia Morris, but Aurelia Jane Morris. Full, unrevised. On the first page, I wrote, "I have loved, I have labored, I have been unseen. This is not a complaint. It is a record." I sat back. The lamp cast a soft halo over the page. My hand trembled, but not from weakness, from release. The notebook would not be a confession. It would be accounting, not of money, of truth. I dedicated one section to memory. I wrote about his first steps, barefoot, sticky with jam, the fever that nearly took him, and the ring that did, the promises he whispered at night, the lullabies I hummed even after he fell asleep, because sometimes I needed them more than he did. Another section I reserved for the law: dates, case numbers, conversations with Judge Harold, confirmations from the bank. The moment the investigator said, "Ms. Morris, you have every right," I wanted him to know. I did not strike back. I stood forward. The final section was blank, waiting for the letter. Marjorie visited that week. I didn't tell her. Illness is a private language, and I was not ready to be translated. "You look tired," she said gently. "I am," I answered. Honestly, she brought soup. She insisted I eat. When she left, I wrote a simple line in the notebook: "Mercy arrives quietly, in bowls." Days grew slower, not longer, slower. Each motion required intention. I stopped working. I folded fabric for the last time and placed my sewing kit on the top shelf. I didn't tell anyone I wouldn't return to it. Goodbyes don't always take the shape of words. Yet I felt no despair. I had begun something, a process, not of revenge, but restoration. The diagnosis clarified something I had always known but never voiced. I could not make him love me, but I could make him face me. I would not leave this world misunderstood. One night, I dreamt of him as a child, barefoot, running through the kitchen, peach juice dripping from his chin. He held a wooden spoon like a sword and shouted, "I will buy you a castle, Mama." In the dream, I did not laugh. I held his face in my hands and whispered, "Just don't forget me." When I woke, dawn was spilling across the floor. I wrote that line down. Just don't forget me. Perhaps it was never a plea. Perhaps it was a warning. A few days later, my phone rang again. His name on the screen. I watched it pulse. Once that name commanded me. It moved me. It defined me. Now it was simply a name. I let it ring. I returned to my notebook. I wrote the first line of the final section. "To my son, I do not leave you with anger. I leave you with mirrors." The day he returned to the country, the sky hung low, washed in gray, the kind of morning that neither promises nor warns. I wasn't told of his arrival, no call, no message, but I felt it, as surely as a shift in barometric pressure. A mother's bones measure distance differently. He landed without reception, no familiar faces, no waiting arms, only officials, questions, a stamp that was not welcome but admitted. His passport was scanned, his bags were inspected. They gave him a sheet of paper, instructions for future hearings, directives for restitution. There were no embraces, only procedures. He passed through the sliding airport doors like a ghost into daylight. I was sitting on my front porch that afternoon, wrapped in a shawl despite the warmth. My wooden chair, rocking gently, had become both anchor and witness. It faced the street, not in hope, but acceptance. I no longer waited. I simply existed. The chair beside me remained empty. I kept it that way, a silent marker. Once that space held room for possibility. Now it holds a boundary. The air was still when I saw him, not approaching but lingering at the corner. He stood there for a long moment, like someone studying a place from memory rather than right. I don't know how long I watched him before he stepped forward. His shoulders had changed, not in width, but weight. He carried something unfamiliar, consequence. He didn't cross the street at first. Instead, he placed something at the edge of the walkway, a small white box, donuts, the same kind he once begged for after church, powdered sugar, custard-filled, a peace offering, or guilt, or both. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He stood there, hands half lifted as though deciding whether to wave or retreat. I did not move. He looked at me then, truly looked. It was the first time in years I felt his eyes search mine, not for approval, but for entry. I offered nothing, not cruelty, not an invitation, nothing. He took a hesitant breath, then stepped back. He didn't ask to come in. He didn't try to speak. He only whispered something I couldn't fully hear. It sounded like, "I'm sorry." Or perhaps it was simply, "I see." The distance distorted it. Or maybe I chose not to decipher. He turned and walked away, the same direction he once left in triumph. But this departure held no momentum. Only reckoning. I didn't rise. I didn't reach for the donuts. I let them sit. I watched as the sun shifted and ants discovered the sugar. Mercy does not always mean reception. Hours passed. Evening approached. Children played on the sidewalk, chasing a red ball. One of them, a little girl with braids, noticed the box and looked toward me for permission. I nodded. She opened it, smiled, and carried it toward her friends. Laughter followed. Even guilt, when left unattended, can be repurposed. That night, I wrote in the red notebook. He returned. He did not knock. He stood. That is all. I paused, then added, "Standing is a beginning." He came again 2 days later. Same box, different bakeries. This time he placed a folded note beneath it. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. A note is not the same as an apology. Apology requires an audience. I was not ready to grant that stage. I remained in my chair. The same wooden chair that had over time molded itself to the shape of my spine. It creaked gently when I rocked. That sound comforted me more than words ever had, because wood, unlike people, warns before it breaks. Neighbors began to notice. Marjorie approached one evening as the sun lowered, carrying iced tea. "He was here again," she said softly. "Yes. Do you want me to speak with him?" "No." "Do you hate him?" I exhaled. "Hate is heavy. I travel light." She nodded and sat with me in silence, respecting the language I now lived in. Word spread slowly through the street. He comes, but she does not answer. Some called it punishment, others self-preservation. The truth belonged to neither. This was not about forgiveness. This was about reflection. He needed to see something he had never been forced to see, a door that would not open to shortcuts. On the 4th visit, he finally crossed the street. He approached the porch, not all the way, but close enough that I could see the tremor in his jaw. He stood at the bottom of the steps. "Mom," the word wavered. I don't expect to come in. I just wanted you to know I'm back. I have to meet with them, the investigators. I don't know what to say." The rocking of my chair slowed. Still, I did not respond. He looked down. "I understand why you won't speak to me." Understanding is not the same as transformation. That too, I wrote later. He lingered, hoping for some flicker, some bridge. There was none. Eventually he left. I remained on the porch until night fell. The air thickened, holding humidity like breath. In the darkness, the empty chair appeared almost human, a phantom of every conversation we would never have. I rested my hand on its armrest. "I am not waiting," I whispered. "I am witnessing." Later, inside, I sat at the table beneath the soft lamp glow. I opened the red notebook. I wrote, "He has begun to return, not to me, to himself." I closed the book and blew out the candle. I walked through each room of my house, a ritual, not of checking, but of affirming. The floors are silent, the windows locked. The world is intact. I crawled into bed, not in sorrow, in stewardship. Time was closing, the truth was not. There is a belief that reconciliation requires dialogue. I disagree. Sometimes the greatest mercy is to let someone hear their own footsteps walking away. The next morning, I found a single daisy on the porch rail. No box, no note, just the flower, white, simple. I lifted it. I turned it in my hand, placed it in a jar. I did not smile. But something in the room unlatched. I had postponed it for as long as time would allow. The final act I knew must be completed while my hands were still steady and my sight still true. There was no urgency, only inevitability. Some truths should not be spoken. They must be written, preserved like pressed flowers between immortal pages. I waited until the house was quiet, until evening had settled into the walls. I laid the red notebook on the kitchen table, then placed a sheet of cream-colored paper beside it. The good paper, the one reserved not for apologies, but for legacies. I took up my pen, not the sewing hand, not the cooking hand, the hand that had once guided his fingers around a pencil, the hand that had steadied his first attempt to write his name. This time I would write mine, my dearest son. I paused. My son, not Evan, because even now, after all that has passed, I will not surrender the truth of what I carried. My dearest son, I will not begin with blame. We both know what you have taken, but now I must speak of what cannot be taken, choice. I chose to bring you into this world. I chose to keep you fed when I went hungry. I chose to shelter you when I had no shelter of my own. And I chose to let you walk away before I ever asked you to stay. Love is not owed, it is given. If you have learned that, you are no longer lost. Those words did not come from anger. They came from a place deeper, older, where mothers speak only in bone language. I continued, you believed, as many do, that a mother's love is infinite, that it bends without breaking, that it waits at every window. Hear me now. Love is patient, but patience is not permission. You did not lose my love. You spent it, and like all things spent without care, it ran out. I paused and looked at the kettle on the stove, silent, but holding the memory of boiling. I wrote on. I do not hate you. Hate is a chain. I have no chains left to carry. I will not say I forgive you. Forgiveness is not a cloth to be handed out to ease another's sleep. Forgiveness must be earned, faced, understood. But I leave this door, not open, not shut, half open. A door cannot welcome a stranger, but it can wait for a son who has learned to knock. As I wrote that word, knock, I remembered his small fists tapping on my bedroom door at 4 years old, afraid of thunder. "Mama, it's loud," he had said. "Make it stop." I told him storms cannot be stopped, only endured. I returned to my letter. One day, if your steps bring you back here, not in fear, not in pride, but in humility, then you may find what remains of me, not my money, not my labor, but my witness. I will not speak for you. I will not shield you, but I will see you. If you can bear to be seen, not as a man wronged, but as a man accountable, then perhaps we will speak again. The ink trembled slightly, not from weakness, but finality. I dipped the pen once more and wrote the last lines. Until that day, remember this. You were my greatest gift. You became my deepest wound, and now you are my unfinished prayer. Do not seek to be forgiven. Seek to be worth forgiving. Your mother, Aurelia Jane Morris. I set the pen down. The letter did not weep. It breathed. I folded it with deliberate care and placed it in an envelope. Across the front, I wrote only his name. No address, no plea. EVAN, I tucked it inside the back of the red notebook, between memory and law, between the mother and the citizen. He would find it one day. Not today, not tomorrow, but when he was ready to read, not eager to defend. There is a difference. I rose and carried the notebook to my bedroom. I placed it atop the cedar chest at the foot of my bed, the chest that held quilts, photographs, the last relics of softness I had saved. I rested my palm on the wood. I have finished, I whispered. Not life, not love, only the record. Later, as I returned to the porch, I saw it again, the empty wooden chair beside mine, unfilled, unclaimed, But for the first time, I did not see an absence. I saw invitation, not to sit, to consider. That night, I slept without dreams. When dawn came, I did not check my phone. There are calls a person must earn the right to receive. I did not see him return the final time. I was no longer there to witness it. The house stood as it always had, quiet, square-shouldered, built to endure. But something essential had shifted. There was no lamplight in the window, no kettle resting on the stove. The chair on the porch remained, but its keeper was gone. He came in the late afternoon. The neighbors said he approached slowly, as if approaching a grave without flowers. He did not carry boxes of apology pastries this time. No notes, only his hands, uncertain as they once were when he first learned to walk. He reached the porch and paused, eyes fixed on the empty chair. Then he opened the door. It was unlocked. It always has been. Inside, the air held neither welcome nor rejection, only remains. The faint scent of lavender, a folded quilt over the couch arm, a teacup dried in the rack. Time had stopped, but nothing was staged. The house was not arranged for forgiveness. He moved through the rooms like someone touring an abandoned museum of their own history. His fingers brushed the dining table where he once practiced spelling, the hallway wall where his height had been marked in pencil, the closed door of my bedroom. He entered. On the cedar chest lay the red notebook, unhidden, unguarded, waiting. His hand hovered above it. I was trembling. He lifted the cover. My handwriting filled the pages, dates, memory, witness. His name, not an accusation, but an accounting. He read. They say he fell to his knees, not from theatrics, from recognition, from the weight of being seen, not as a victim, but cause. He read the letter twice. I know, because the creases deepened, the bottom edge smudged where a thumb had pressed tears into the paper. Love is not owed. It is given. You did not lose my love. You spent it. A door cannot welcome a stranger, but it can wait for a son who has learned to knock. Somewhere between those lines, something entered him. Perhaps remorse, perhaps understanding, perhaps the first honest silence he had ever met within himself. The neighbors would later say he stayed for hours, not moving, not speaking, not rearranging or searching. There was nothing left to find, nothing to salvage, only truth to absorb. As evening deepened, he stood. He walked to the front porch, and for the first time, he sat in my chair. The wooden frame creaked beneath him. He held the notebook in his lap. The chair did not reject him, but it did not belong to him, not yet. I imagined the thoughts that visited him then, not visions of Rome or luxury, but of simpler things. My hands are tying his shoes. My voice whispered hymns when storms rattled the windows. My footsteps pacing when fever threatened his breath. My eyes, young once, watching him sleep with a tenderness he never knew. He must have realized finally that love had never been loud. It had always been infrastructure, and he had lived his life believing it was scenery. Night arrived. Streetlights flickered on like mild sentinels. He rose, carried the notebook inside, and placed it gently on the table. He did not close it. He let it remain open to the page where I had written, "You were my greatest gift. You became my deepest wound, and now you are my unfinished prayer." He traced the words, then perhaps he nodded. Not in agreement, in surrender. He left the house with no plans. He did not lock the door. He simply pulled it until it rested shut, not sealed, not open, half. People asked later, did he inherit it? The house, the savings? They misunderstand the nature of inheritance. He inherited something else. A question. Will I live deserving of return? I do not know what path he chose, whether he paid the debts, whether he rebuilt what he had broken, whether he ever married again or walked alone. Those chapters are not mine to write. I only know this. He never asked for a key. Some nights I imagine him walking by the house years later, pausing at the porch. Perhaps the chair has been moved. Perhaps a new family lives there, unaware of what the wood once held. But maybe, just maybe, He whispers into the dusk, "I am here," and waits to see if anything answers. Before I left, I wrote one final line in the notebook, beneath everything else. Some doors open only when you learn how to knock. Not loudly, not desperately, respectfully. I did not write an ending. I wrote a threshold, because healing, real healing, is not a reunion. It is recognition. And so, to those who listen to this, I leave a question, not about me, about you. If it were you, would you open that door?